The Final Frontier. These are your adventures as you explore, seeking out new life and civilizations, expanding your borders and exploiting the resources you find, befriending allies, or exterminating the foes that get in your way.
Contact detected entering sector. Configuration unknown. Assessing. Initiating countermeasures.
All right, based on our experience last week, audio check. Looks like the levels are good. Hopefully you can hear me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Star Trek New Worlds. My name is Tony. Welcome to today's show. Today's show where we're going to be talking about...
Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely. Let's get sad again.
That's right, more war. Because after all, we are playing a war game. But if it's your first time here and you're wondering what in the world is Star Trek New Worlds, it is a turn-based strategy game that we play here online with you today on YouTube Live. We play it inspired by the rule set of Federation and Empire as published by the Amarillo Design Bureau. The magic of the map that you're going to see here shortly is through the magic of Vassal. And of course, the fun and excitement is going to be provided to you by all the wonderful players that we have in our community. If you would like to be like Tom Robinson down there and be part of our community, then please feel free to hit that subscribe button with all the alerts to make sure you know what's happening, when it's happening, and so on and so forth. And of course, if you are even more inspired, even more entertained, then you can head over to that link at coffee.com/New Worlds, also pinned in the chat, where you can fire us a photon of goodness, which you will see later today, where caffeinated, supreme elixir of life will lubricate our larynx to keep me giving you the latest and greatest news of what's going on in this world. Let me take a quick sip. There is a gray bar below me. It will populate green as we progress our way through our photon fire of caffeinated goodness. Woo! All right. Let's get into it. Okay, so today, like I say, we're talking about war. Can the Borak survive the three-way onslaught that they are encumbered by? And at the same time, who screwed up on the Western Front, or I guess on the Eastern Front, depending on your perspective? Lyrans have suffered some massive casualties in their initial conflicts with the Borak. What happened? How did it go down? We'll talk about that in a momento. And of course, we're going to go around the map and highlight everything that's going on in the turn. This is turn 62. So without further ado, let me slide over to and get to our galactic news. Welcome to the galactic news. Triple threat. The Borak are now fighting a war on 3 fronts. What started as a dispute between the Borak and the Lyran has now expanded to all their neighbors. The Carnivon have seized Borak resources, moved the bulk of their fleets to Borak borders, and have begun attacking naval units. The ISC have attacked civilian shipping and unarmed exploration freighters as they have entered the war. As a yellow and green tide threatens to flood this region of space, we have to wonder, can the Borak bounce back from this bellicose business, or will they be buried by the brutal and belligerent ballet that is brought by the fortunes of war? Excellent job, Daniel. Counter-Strike. As trade lanes open across the galaxy, those who move the freight are beginning to agitate for better pay and more anti-piracy patrols. In 2 empires, the merchant marines have gone on strike, bringing convoys and commerce to a halt. As negotiations between unions and governments drag on, we here at GNN are working hard to ensure your daily newspaper still makes it to your front door. Rock, paper, kitten, Spock? After a brief border conflict, it appears the Kazintian Federation have not only buried the hatchet, but expanded their economic ties. The second major trade route between galactic powers has now been declared open for business. Vulcan and Kazinti representatives have heralded this as a boon for both their peoples and an example to the galaxy of the most logical way for bordering nations to interact. Really? Technology on the march. In labs across the galaxy, breakthroughs are quietly being made. Some say let's try that again. Start that story again. Technology on the march. In labs across the galaxy, breakthroughs are quietly being made that some say will revolutionize starship designs in the future. While this GNN reporter is not allowed to reveal sources or locations, in multiple empires, there are researchers quietly creating the future. A future that would allow ships to cross vast distances in record time. Astronomers to see further and better into unknown phenomena. And kitchens to finally have non-stick pans that are microwave safe. Yes, the next era of technology will surely bring a utopia of peace and plenty to the galaxy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, has been our galactic news. Oh, yes. So before we get into the delicious map information, we need, of course, to go over the econ and what's going on the turn. Before I do that, I'm going to say a quick hello to those of you in the chat. Although I can see us at double digits, and thank you for those of you who have joining us live here today, I can see that our chat population, or the chat, is rather sparse. Let's take a quick peek here. We can see Bill Smith and Langerome in there. Eugene, our latest and greatest public affairs officer, is saying, welcome to a tax preparation weekend update. Who will pay the price for each empire's defense? Which empires will wish they spent more on arms or diplomacy? Only time will tell. Paul is in the house. Chuck is here. Bill, heyo. And of course, as I mentioned, Langerome. So feel free, don't be shy. Get yourself into the chat and tell me how I'm screwing up the news, how you want this game to play out. And of course, let the banter begin, because there is so much to talk about today. We're going to jump into, once I can find my cursor, here it is. We're going to slide over to the map and talk, well, not the map, the chart, and talk about econ in turn 62. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here it is. In full effect and stereo sound, yes, you can see we are in turn 62, and there are some noticeable hockey sticks and or ups and downs when it comes to the econ. Let's start from the bottom going to the top, so to speak. Things have changed quite a bit. You can see the Tholians are at 59.5, still riding the pine as the bottom of the barrel of the econ, but they are close to the number 2 slot, which is the Lyrans at 61.5. Very interesting to note. And of course, this is all really tight together because the Lyrans are at 61.5, the Hydrans at 62, the Borak at 62.5, and the ISC leaping ahead of all their bottom tier compatriots now at 64.5. But you can see that everybody is sort of in that sort of 5 EP huddle at the bottom of the econ barrel. Leading the charge into the upper tier is the Kazinti at 70 total EP. The Federation slipping a little bit now at 79.5 relative to their Peravian foul. The Paravian are now at 83. There's obviously been some significant economic happenings in the Paravian Empire. We'll have to take a look and find out what's going on. They are now at 83. Notice that orange hockey stick jump over on the other side over there. You can see that there. So the Paravians are at 83, the Carnivon up 1 to 96, and the Klingons likely as well at 101.5. So you can see the order of economic superiority, shall we say, or hierarchy has changed quite a bit over the past couple turns. And there's a couple of interesting things that will show us why that is the case. But let me slide over to the chat real quick and leave you, before we get into the map, with a question. Here we go. All right. Welcome back to the chat. Here we are. We are at double digits. Thank you very much. Really appreciating all your concurrent support here on this wonderful Saturday morning. 11 o'clock is when we start the show here, at least Pacific time. Depending on where you are in the world, it's exciting for you. We have players across the pond here in North America. And of course, we are a global population of Federation and Empire players. But I will start today's live stream with this particular query in your direction. You let me know in the chat what you think and how things are going. In a previous game, not in this game, in a previous game, there had been an exchange between players around, shall we say, bully tactics around war games. So I ask you this. War games are about war. Fundamentally, conflict. There can only be one winner, and there's always going to be a first loser, so to speak. Somebody has got to get kicked in the teeth at some point, and somebody has to lose. In fact, everybody really is going to lose except for whoever is the one or small collection of quote-unquote winners. So if you're playing a war game, you have to be ready for conflict. You have to be willing to accept the fact that you most likely will lose in some way, shape, or form. There will be many victories along the way, and certainly more losses as you slowly inch your way through the timeline of whatever game you're playing. Now, you could be playing games online such as Civilization or anything in the Total War franchise, and so on and so forth. In this particular turn-based game, and because of the way the map is oriented with, as you saw, sort of like a layer cake of different factions, 3 on the top, 2 in the middle, 2 in the middle, and then 3 on the bottom. We have all sorts of interesting dynamics as the different players interact. And I would say that the current configuration of our map is very similar, or at least has a lot of similarities to Europe pre-World War I. A lot of sort of imperial and nationalistic interests competing against each other and shuffling to be able to find a balance of power. And so why do I bring this up? Because in this game, right now, as we saw in the news, the Borak are currently getting three-peated or dogpiled on by 3 different factions. The Carnivon, largest military in the game, and we'll talk about their military in a moment when we go to the map. The Lyrans, who, through the characteristics of their empire are quite territorial, aggressive, and antagonistic. And then the ISC, which is an interesting development because they had originally been a quote-unquote, well, maybe not exactly an ally, but certainly a friend in the sense of they had signed a mutual defense pact, and of course now that is no longer the case. So while the ISC might be a slight surprise, the gang up of the, shall we say, the gang of 3 between the Carnivon, the Lyrans, and the ISC, all jumping on the Borak. And I want you to look at the map as we're going through this and think about this for yourself. If you were playing a game like this, again, a war game, where conflict is innate in what you're doing, you're playing a war game to fight wars with other players. So if you're playing a war game like that, and in a game like this, the combination of territory and or economy, which is closely related, and of course the size of your military, is a balance that you're constantly playing in. And if you have a player who is weak enough that they are getting, or in a compromised position where they are being ganged up by 1 or more other players, is it not logical to be able to jump in on that attack? Now, you might have thoughts about honor and fairness and all that kind of stuff, and that may be true, but from a purely utilitarian perspective, when you're fighting a war game and your two neighbors are going to gobble up another player, don't you want to get in on the action too and balance things out a little bit? If someone is going to fall, shouldn't the spoils of that, shall we say, failure be spread out evenly as opposed to disproportionately towards one side or the other? So I bring that all to say that even though you're going to hear me trash talk and come up with colorful rhetoric around the combination of attacks that are coming against the Borak, it is completely legit, totally acceptable, and it's part of a war game that a player like me as the Borak is getting ganged up on in this way. From the in-game universe, the Borak are territorially aggressive in the sense that they expand. Granted, as I will say here in moments, not militarily aggressive, but they have been, expanding. And other factions who may be threatened by that may choose to react in a militaristic way, i.e. what we see with the Lyrans. So that is completely understandable and legit. And the Borak, if you think back to the first live streams around New Horizons, the Borak had a terrible start. They were in a compromised position. They have a crappy fleet composition in the sense that they have really bad frigates and destroyers, and yet, and their total fleet count is small relative to the other factions. So when you're the Borak and you're playing, you have to take that into consideration that you might get, shall we say, pushed, pressured, or otherwise contested when it comes to what it is that you're doing. It just so happens that in this particular context, you have a Carnivon player who is contained and needs to break out. And the best way to break out might be through the Borak. You have the ISC player who similarly is contained in a corner and needs to break out in some way. Well, shall we say, break out towards the Borak. And then you have the Lyran player who, of course, with the interaction that's going on there, very territorial, very contesting around the borders, and of course is pushing back. So in that dynamic, it is completely acceptable, logical, and okay that they are doing what they're doing. Why am I saying all this? Because it's a war game. We're fighting wars. This is part of how the game is played, and I don't have my feelings bruised, hurt, or otherwise about the fact that I'm getting three-peated on by everyone around. Granted, I'm a little grumpy about it, not so happy about it, but it's part of the game. It's the way it happens. If you don't know that this is going to happen in a war game, then maybe you shouldn't be playing a war game. So with that said, and my peace out, I'm going to revert back to the propagandist that I will be in the next coming turns or in the next coming moments, and I will spit such foul rhetoric towards my enemies that it will make you blush. But remember, it's a war game. It's all fair in love and war. This is what we do. This is how we play. So don't let your feelings get hurt. And if they are, maybe this isn't the game for you. So anyways, here we go. Let's talk about the map. All right. So we were talking about fleet composition. Let's pull up fleet cap and figure out what is going on. Of course, Vassal is not the fastest thing in the world. Here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, a coffee has been fired. Oh, I got to follow over here. Boom. It looks like Lost Muskrat has fired a photon of goodness our way. Thank you, Lost Muskrat. Let me take a quick sip to lubricate my larynx, stimulate the juices of my cerebrum to give you the latest and greatest and sharpest wit that I can possibly give. Stand by. That's right. Keep calm. Carry on. For those my friends across the pond, one more sip just because it was so good. All right. Oh, my goodness. Coffee all over me. All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the Borak fleet is growing by leaps and bounds. Last turn, they were at a total of 48 ships. Now they're at 57, with a total attack factor of 131, 269 defense, with a fleet cap of 282. That's right, casualties have been taken, and there are some crippled ships in the mix. The Carnivon, oh, Jesus, 120, come on. They are 120 total ships, literally more than twice the size of the Borak fleet. Oh, God, Jesus. All right, 120 total ships, 264 attack. Oh, my God. The hopelessness of it just makes me laugh. All right, 264 attack, 494 defense, fleet cap of 496. All right, here we go. Federation has a total of 73 ships floating in the deep abyss. 159 total attack factors, 288 on the defense, fleet cap 297. As a reminder, the fleet cap number, when it's different than the defense factor, typically indicates that there are some crippled ships in the mix. That's the big reason why I sort of talk about fleet cap and the defense factors concurrently. All right, let's talk about the Hydrans at their total econ of 60. Their total econ is 60 with 130 in the attack factors, 259 defense. The ISC have 47 total ships. Did I say econ? I think fumbling here. So yes, Hydrans have a total of 60 ships, 130 attack, 259 defense. The ISC now with 47 ships. I feel like that's the same number from last turn because I seem to recall that the ISC had either more ships or just really close to the total number of Borak ships. We'll have to go back to last live stream and check that out. But the ISC have 47 ships now with 116 total attack factors, 221 defense with a fleet cap at 225. The Klingons, not to be outdone by their Carnivon brethren, are at 101 total fleet cap, 240 attack. Jeez Louise. 240 attack, 424 defense with a 461 fleet cap. The Kzinti, like the Borak, have a total of 57 ships with, wow, interesting, same number of attack factors at 131, slightly less defense factors at 235, and a fleet cap of 239. That's very interesting. Lyrans have 61 total ships. 61 total ships in their fleet, 130 attack, 265 defense, and this is the big delta, 265 on their defense, 291 fleet cap. So there's quite a few crippled ships in the mix. The Paravians growing their fleet by leaps and bounds, previously in the single digits, now at 29 total ships with 88 attack, 169 defense. I feel like they're building a ton of tugs and cruisers, but that just may be my what I would do in that situation. The Tholians, our good friends down under, as in at the bottom of the map, are at 73 total ships, 127 attack, 333. That's pretty good defense factors, tying or matching their fleet cap. So no cripples in their fleet. That's where we're sitting when it comes to the exciting and delighting fleet cap around the map. All right. So obviously, we've opened the map here on this focal point in the center. This is sort of the heat map. This is the focus of the action in these coming turns. But before I talk about this, I'm going to talk about the bottom of the map so that we can focus the latter half of the broadcast on the meat and potatoes of the conflict that's ongoing. All right, so we have the Hydrans here. They are the folks in green. You can see that they are basically continuing all their wonderful exploration goodness. Now, their economy hasn't really shifted much, but they are continuing to explore and expand. If I take away their ships real quick, you can see base construction going on here on the border with the Paravians, and up in the corner here, continuing to push the boundaries of what they have explored. When it comes to 4X games, obviously, exploration is one of those big X's, and that is where the Hydrans find themselves focused on right now. And they are pushing to the edge of their territorial border, as it was agreed, and they are moving north here towards the Federation. If we slide a little bit over to our bird-brained friends, that's right, the Paravians, I feel like if I take away these ships, I'm going to take away bases? Aha. No, that's not it either. So the Paravian economy just popped by a significant number. So let's do a quick round the perimeter and see where we can find what's been discovered. So when I flash these ships, look for ships that are currently on a resource. So for example, right off the bat, there is this small YFES that's discovered a resource. There is this large exploration freighter that has discovered a resource. And as we go around here, there is the cruiser here, which is on a colony. And anything else? I'm looking. Oh, here we go. There's another resource that's been found. He was very successful in his exploration this turn. 4 new resources discovered like that. So perhaps he was I feel like he was in 78 and then popped up. Maybe. I don't know. Interesting. I'll be interested to hear from our good friend, the GM or a Paravian player, to find out what may have been the key things that popped their economy over 80 and in such a profound way in one turn. Certainly there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Where is it? 4 EP that were discovered this turn. That's a big bump in their economy. When it comes to ships that they're building, let's just take a quick look if they have any fleets. They've got Eagle Fleet there. There we go. Paravian, Bird Fleets, Eagle Fleet. Eagle Fleet's gained another cruiser. They previously had 3 and 3. Oh, wow. Look at this. 13 frigates and 4 cruisers. Yep, they're preparing to attack the Remans here. That is for sure. The Remans continue to be hostile towards the Paravians. So that's a that's a big battle that's about to happen. And of course, when it does, they'll be going into limited war status, which means they'll have about 4 turns of a bumped up economy. As a reminder, for those of you who are following at home, we have 3 economic states. One is peace, and at peace you get 50% of your gross income. So for example, we've been looking through all those numbers. The Paravians, by example, have 83 in gross income. That is their not any trade routes that they may have or any other sort of supplemental income, but purely the resources and the planets that they control. That is their baseline gross income, 83. That 83 number gets divided in half during peacetime, and that's how much EP they can spend per turn. However, if you go to limited war, which can be only done for a maximum of 4 turns, limited war allows you to get 75% of your income. So basically 3/4 of your total gross. And then when you go to war status, you get 100% of everything that you make. Now, the big difference between those two, limited war can only be done for 4 turns at a time and a total of 8 turns within a 10-turn period, I believe. Maybe it's 6. I have to check. But it's limited within a fixed time frame, whereas war can go on forever. However, for every turn you are at war, you incur a war turn. Those are exhaustive war exhaustion turns that accumulate for each round or each turn of war that you have to a point where your economy starts to suffer as a result. When you exceed 20 turns of war turns, then you start to suffer economic consequences. After the first 20 turns, you start at 75% of income instead of 100%. When you go past 30, it goes down to 50%, and there's more and more after that. So no one's near that point now, but it's something to think about, because for every war turn that you accumulate, it takes 2 turns at peace to burn it off. So if you're at war for 10 turns, you will have war turns in the bank until 20 turns of peace later, and that is when you will have burned off those turns. So something to think about as we go forward, and something specifically to think about that war up in the north. Okay, that's the Paravians. Now, am I wrong in thinking that there used to be a border, a neutral zone between the Tholians and the Paravians? I feel like there was. Am I wrong? I feel like there was a line, and now it's not there anymore. Interesting. What is going on? Perhaps somebody can enlighten me what's going on here. Oh, one last thing before we go through, go to the Tholians. See this little tug right here? This wormhole goes to the Borak space, and I think we are about to see a base being built here to prevent, shall we say, visitors coming through and saying hello. So that's one thing to think about. All right, so we've got, let me move my head to the other side because, of course, I'm in the way. We have our Tholian friends who continue to have this cloud hanging over them. Ha, ha, ha. Terrible joke. All right, let's zoom in a little bit here. So we have a cloud hanging over them in the corner. We have a repaired Klingon E1T, so perhaps things are not as tense between the Tholians and the Klingons as we perhaps might have thought in the past. It seems that this E1T is making its way back to Juliet to go back to Klingon space. So there's a cloud. We've got first garrison here, which looks like it's building a base. And then, of course, we've got I'm going to assume a diplomat here. Yes, a diplomat trying to play nice with the Vudar, who currently couldn't care less about the Tholians one way or the other, being indifferent. But if they can improve their planetary attitudes, that'll be a nice 2 EP added to their economy. Wonderful to see. We've got more survey fleets conducting their survey activities around the edges of Tholian space, and especially up towards the border here, as I believe we're going to see more and more bases built to be able to facilitate the reach of exploration as we move up and up and up. This convoy, without a doubt, is going to be building a base shortly. Interesting. Building a base shortly, I am sure, to be able to facilitate exploration. I'll be very interested to see the tensions, shall we say, between these two factions, the Paravians and the Tholians. Whether it's, shall we say, orange and yellow to red and white, who will come out as the crimson color of preference? Time will tell. As we look to the, all of a sudden I've decided to get a German accent. That's what happens when you start looking at the Kazinti. I mean, I can't think of a kitty cat accent, so I'll just speak in German. Not really. Okay, so here we are, the Kazinti, working their way with exploration fleets among us. Look at this. So much exploration going on the borders. Let's just take a quick look at these ally fleets, because I'm pretty sure, once I can find Kazinti up here. Jeez Louise. I am blind. Ally. Here we are. So ally fleet, we got 6. Look at that. Survey ship with a prime team. Bam. Olympus fleet, probably more of the same. Kazinti. Olympus. Yep. Survey ship with an escort. So there's lots of surveying occurring as we go here. Interesting to note, look at all these little stars that you see. All the little stars are ships that have been moved this turn. These are things in Vassal that once you move a counter, it shows a little star on it showing that it's been moved, and then you can reset it at the start of every turn. So obviously our GM is leaving those in place, potentially on purpose, to be able to show us what ships or what units have moved. So you can see lots of movement here, lots of exploration happening. Tugs on their way, building bases, as you can see. This one looks like it's building, and another one providing extended supply to facilitate more of this exploration. As we go up to the north, you can see they are pushing towards their border, the shared border with the Lyrans. And what do we got here? We got tug and a frigate. We've got exploration ship, cruiser, Ally Fleet 4. There we go. Survey ship, and of course, small exploration freighter. So we got lots of all that stuff going on. Oh, the Gorn here seem to be somewhat unhappy with our Kazinti friends. Yes, they do not seem to be liking what it is you are giving them. Terrible German accent. 8 planetary ground bases, YDK, and expeditionary fleet. Let's take a look at this minor faction, just see how problematic this may be. Minor empires. Let's expand this ever so slightly. So expeditionary fleet, you can see here, that's the second from the bottom on the white row. Wow, that is not a small fleet. So there's a DN, a command cruiser, a total of 4 light cruisers, 6 destroyers, 12 frigates, a commando cruiser, a tug, and a convoy. For a minor faction, that's not nothing. That's quite a bit of stuff. That is definitely seismic in its ability to do stuff. Very, very interesting. Okay, so if I'm the Kazinti, I want to make sure that they're nice and friendly with me. Obviously, that's not going exactly the way they would like. What's Prince Fleet? Kazinti Prince Fleet. There we go, Prince's Fleet. There's our diplomat. So command cruiser with the diplomat in Prince's Fleet trying to make things better between these two factions. Hopefully it all works out, because I would hate to see the Kazinti have to go to war and stomp out that problematic Gorn faction. But we shall see as things continue between these two colorful factions. Let's slide over to our boys in blue. Look at those Federation goodies. All right. So as you can see here, there is some distance between the Lyrans building and have completed their base up here in the sort of the border region between them and the Federation. We have a commercial convoy. Looks like it was perhaps on its way to... Oh, this commercial convoy looks like it's on its way to here. Interesting. Okay. But they are unhappy with the Federation, so that convoy is not going to be able to do anything because they need to be neutral at the very least to be able to establish a trade route. So interesting to see that as a sort of a challenge as they go forward. We've got a frigate floating around at a YDK here. 2 bases within 2 hexes of this YDK. I wonder if perhaps this is a defensive posture versus whatever may come from the Lyrans, as the Lyrans have proven to be quite pushy. As we go, we've got 9th, 10th, 4th, all these guys doing exploration business up in the north, which is good. You can see the new trade route that's been established between the Federation and the Kazinti. Kitty cats and human beings together. Obviously, they're cat people. I wouldn't know. I mean, the Lyrans are cat people too, so obviously I'm not so much. But I guess I'm not an animal person in this game because the dogs and cats are both coming at me.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Oh my God. Okay, so yes, more exploration along the border regions of the Federation. You can see they're really pushing out to the edges of their established borders or agreed to borders, continuing to push exploration-wise to the east to perhaps stem the tide of Hydran flooding into their backspace or their backyard. So that's good. Lots of business happening here. You can see we've got a crippled ship. Is there a base? Yeah, there is a base there. So crippled frigate here. Along with 3 other ships just kind of guarding the wormhole. This hotel wormhole heads over to ISC space. We'll talk about that in a momento. Got a couple of fleet. Oh, what's the in order fleet? I wonder. ISC. I guess it's one of the named echelons. Order fleet has a light cruiser and a diplomat. Okay. Interesting. So light cruiser and a diplomat there. And that's pretty much it. The Federation, if we recall, we go back to Fleet Cat real quick. Federation has relatively large space, 73 ships. So, but note they have 73 ships and only about 160 attack. If you look at the difference between, let's say, and I use the Borak because we know that the Boraks have a disproportionate amount of cruisers in their fleet of 57. Look at that 131 at basically 57. So that's a difference of 16 ships. And it's only a difference of maybe 13 attack factor. Well, not 13 attack factor. It's 13. Try this again. 16 ships and 30 attack factor. 28, I guess, difference, which is less than 2 attack factor per ship. So that's interesting. Just interesting to note. I wonder what the sort of disposition of fleets and ships in the Federation space are, and what they have on the go. And based on what we heard in the news, where are they when it comes to their next technological breakthrough and what's going on? All right, so that is the Federation, the Kazinti. Let's slide up the side and talk about our good friends, the Klingons. Quick cough. Okay, so we knew that their backyard, which is in this top left corner here, was getting slightly explored by a survey ship. And you can see they are continuing to survey. It would seem as though they may be out of supply. So this convoy providing extended supply, I am assuming, and they're just looking to clear out the foggy war hexes in the backyard here. But if I'm the Klingons, I'm going to be building a base here sometime soon to facilitate the exploration without the convoy doing extended supply. The Klingon capital looks like it has quite the stack. We've got home and green fleet plus 3 tugs. Jeez Louise. Okay, so let's take a look. Klingon home fleet. If I remember, they have a whole bunch of F4s. Yes, so they have a total of 7 F4s with 1 crippled. Interesting that they have 1 crippled. That's been there for quite some time. So we got home fleet, and then, of course, Klingon green fleet, which I believe is Martox. Here we are. Ooh, look at that. That's a lot of E1Ts, 7 E1Ts, and another 2 F4s. So we got a total of 9 F4s that are fully operational, 1 crippled, and then, of course, 7 of these E1Ts. Now, those E1Ts can when 3 of them combined together, to form Voltron. No, I mean to do things that a tug can do. That's right. 3 little guys get together and they can do fun stuff. Kind of like, for those of you who don't get the Voltron reference, maybe more a Power Rangers kind of thing. We'll see. Or the Combiners from Transformers. Hello. So something like that is going on there. Right? Maybe they're the technological breakthrough. Their E1Ts shall combine to form Devastator. Or something like that. What do we got? Tholian Border Squadron. Tholian Border Squadron. What are you doing? All right, let's find you. Tholian Border Squadron. A total of 8. Count them 8 F4s. God, those F4s are such good ships. In the Y era, they are sweet. They are cheap to build. They are easy to use. They are just so good. I just can't say enough good things about that. And of course, looks like the R&D team is plowing away on wormhole tech, trying to make that happen sooner rather than later. As we go around to the northeast, you can see lots of exploration stuff going on. Large exploration freighters and small ones continuing to push back the boundaries of unknown space. And what do we got here? We got a derelict, which has been captured by the tug, and it's now making its way to somewhere. I'm going to assume a YDK is where they have to go, but perhaps someone can give me a little highlight of where they need to go in order to be recovered. I see some chat there. I'll jump in there in a second. So exploration, we have the derelict capture. I'll be very interested to find out about that derelict. Space Hulk in the waiting. What else we got here? We got Blue Fleet. Big, bad, blue. Kempek, maybe? Yeah, there we go. Blue Fleet. Blue Fleet command cruiser with a couple of... God, those F4s. I'm a Klingon fan. What can I say? I'm a fanboy. One single E1T here with a first Imperial War Squadron. Is that what they were? Imperial War Reserve. My mistake. So first Imperial War Reserve. I think they were a bunch of crippled ships that they needed to get repaired. And of course, this is a YDK. And then if I remember correctly, all the repaired ships are going into West Fleet. Something like that. So we got 4 F4s. No big deal. Okay. YFEL, so doing some more exploration stuff, and the Northwest Fleet, which I think that was like a single... was it? Yeah, no, that's Northeast. Where's Northwest? Am I missing something? Oh, there's Northwest. Yeah, it's E1Ts. So there's... Weird that there's 2 E1Ts there. What happened to the third one? Very strange. Okay, large exploration freighters continue to push the boundaries. And here is the thrust of Klingon activity in the south. We have Romulans, we have Gorn, we have Remans. Lots of interaction here. Oh, that's interesting. So we have a minor planet. That's a potential 3 EP. A medium planet, which is 4. And a friendly Gorn planet with a 2. That's a developing planet with 2 EP. That's the circle, full little circle with the dot in the middle, is a developing planet that is a 2 EP thing. It's one step above the colony. Okay, so that's a lot of good stuff. This D4E seems to have had a terrible encounter with something bad, which is why it's crippled. But we have a fleet of F4s in the vicinity, along with a cruiser and expeditionary fleet. I seem to be spending a lot of time on the Klingons. What can I say? I'm a little biased. Expeditionary fleet? Is that what that is? Yeah. So survey ship with the prime team with cruiser escort. And, of course, a bunch of F4s in the background. So here we go. Tugs, survey ships, cruisers. Got lots of good stuff here, really pushing that exploration south. So the question is, and I mean, we've got a lot of other activity that people can worry about, but I'm going to be really curious to see what happens with the Klingons over the next, let's say, 10 turns. So as they push south, which they will continue to do, and they are doing it far more aggressively than the Lyrans, what is going to happen with the positioning of the Klingons relative to the Lyrans? Why is this a point? Why is this something I want to focus on? Let me slide back to the chat and postulate this question. All right, so the Klingons, as you saw, are sort of on the northwestern or top left to the Lyrans. The Lyrans up to now have been very, generally speaking, I'm taking my propagandist hat off at this point, just sort of trying to be analytical, have been quite sort of territorial in the sense of a very defensive about their perceived territorial boundaries. There was an interaction with the Klingons earlier on where they attempted to establish a border way far beyond their explored space, sort of like the middle ground between, at the time, the Klingons and the Lyrans. The Klingons didn't agree to that because they were exploring aggressively and the Lyrans were not, so it didn't seem, I would assume, it didn't seem sort of fair at that point. And the evidence or the results seem to prove that, in the sense the Klingons have moved far beyond, or at least past, that potential line, and the Lyrans have not. The Lyrans, as per their interaction with the Borak, are become quite aggressive when their perceived footprint gets impeded upon. So if you extrapolate that out, the Klingons are on track to do that in some way, shape, or form. The Klingons are coming south, and coming south hard, in the sense of ships, the number of ships that they have, the resources that they're bringing, and all that so on. So they're coming south hard. The Lyrans have very little, relatively speaking, in that section of their space where the Klingons are coming down. The Lyrans seemingly now are expanding more aggressively than they were before. There is, as I look at the map now, and of course you can't see it in this moment, but I see the overwhelming majority of their survey ships are exploring in the northwest to west. So there is a concerted effort by the Lyrans to sort of address this concern. But because the Lyrans are sort of overly committed to their east, they don't have anything in the west. The Klingons are the second largest military in the game, and they are coming south with the majority of their offensive firepower. So what conceivably happens when you have one of the largest economy in the game and one of the largest militaries in the game bump up against one of the weakest? And I'm not trying to be judgmental. It's just like the Klingons are the number one economy and second largest military in the game, and the Lyrans are like number 9 on the list, in the sense of like second from the bottom. So that's just where we are. So if that's the case, what happens? Are the Lyrans going to be as, shall we say, temperamental as they have been with the Borak relative to the Klingons? I would imagine not, because the Klingons are big and the Lyrans are not as big. But who knows? I mean, again, role-playing, character, all this kind of stuff. How things are going to evolve are going to be very different. But again, this is sort of like a tomorrow problem, right? 10 turns out, this is where I think it's going to go. Maybe 5, who knows? But somewhere between 5 and 10, let's say, there's going to be some sort of contact between these two forces. And with the Lyrans not having a lot of offensive firepower in the neighborhood and the Klingons having a lot, with the imbalance of power, relatively speaking, between the Klingons and the Lyrans, what is that interaction going to look like? Will there be a submission of some sort, or a recognition that the Klingons are bigger, badder, better? Will there be a defiant approach, which pushes back against all that? I don't know. It'll be very interesting. And at the time that occurs, where will the conflict be between the Borak, the Lyrans, the Carnivon, the Odyssey? Like, where's that conflict going to be? Is there still going to be activity on that Eastern Front, pulling Lyran attention? Or are the Lyrans going to be able to take their massive fleet that they theoretically have built as a result of their war economy and shift it to the West? What is that going to look like? How is that going to evolve? We shall see. So I asked that question because it's, again, using that reference or that sort of analogy of Western Europe in, or just Europe in the pre-World War I era. There's all these states pushing, prodding, and balancing each other for power. And if you overcommit, or you commit to one front, one side, one action, it imbalances your positioning relative to the others. I will say the Carnivon, up until this war with the Borak, had been very good about balancing their disposition of forces relative to all their neighbors. Obviously, they're, as we will see here shortly, they are heavily committing to the Borak offensive. But so it'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out, and what the Klingons, or the neighbors of the Carnivon, which are the IC and the Klingons, what they do in relation to that. So how do the Klingons interact with the Carnivon and the Lyrans? How are the IC going to eventually evolve after their attacks with the Borak? And what are the other factions in the game going to do? The Kzinti, the Federation, the Paravians, the Hydrons, and the Tholians are so far away from that center of conflict that I don't see how they could possibly influence it or impact it. Even the Federation and the Kzinti are far enough away that they can't really do much, if anything. So how is that? But how is that all going to play out? You could see if the Borak fall, and granted we have some bets on how long it'll take, but if the Borak fall, let's say within 5 turns, let's say 10 turns, let's say they fall within 10 turns. Once they fall, who comes out on top? Is it the Carnivon, who, based on the number of ships they're potentially committing to this attack, because the majority of their fleet is in the south, and remember, that's 120 ships they have in their total fleet. Oh, God. So 120 ships coming for the Borak homeworld. So let's say they take it out. Do the Carnivon take the majority of the Borak space? Depending on how quickly their blitzkrieg can execute, then arguably they would be in the best position. The Lyrans are being tied up right now with the Borak, as we'll see. The Carnivon less so, and the ISC are just too far away. The ISC have to build a lot of base and supply to be able to get to the Borak and cause any real damage. They can, for sure, but it's just going to take time. So in the time that it takes them to get there, will the Carnivon be able to close the distance and capture the bulk of Borak assets? And if they do, where does that put them relative to everybody else? Keeping in mind 3 key factors. 1, the Carnivon are the current biggest military in the game, and now at a war economy, they are the highest income earners in the game. Yes, the Klingons have a higher economy, but remember, peace economy is only 50% of your gross. The Carnivon are getting 100% of their 96 right now, and they're pumping all that into whatever it is. They're building ships and maybe research, base building. I mean, they've got so much money, it's sick. So they're taking all that money. Where are they putting it? What are they doing with it? How are they using that? And they're going to be at war for definitely a couple turns. So how is that going to disproportionately advantage them? So that's one. They're going to build a whole bunch of stuff, whether it's bases, ships, or whatever. They're going to move that needle significantly relative to everybody else. 2, they're going to get reach. So they, because of the number of ships that they have, and of course the economy they have to spend, they're going to be able to build bases faster. They're going to be advanced more quickly. They are going to be able to claim more territory at a greater pace than the Lyrans or the ISC. If they are successful and they get into Borak space, again, a proportional increase of income. And take a look when we look at the Borak, when we look at the space of the Borak, look at where all the econ is. Like, where are all those resources and those planets? So how much are they going to be able to gain of that? And what kind of reach are they going to be able to get? The Borak are quite sort of positionally, they're not terrible. And if you're able to, let's say, take the homeworld, that gives you some pretty substantive reach to the south. So if the Carnivon are able to claim that, able to secure it, relative to the ISC and the Lyrans, then they're going to have a funnel or a very clear path south to Federation, Hydrons, whomever. And then, of course, because of their large size, militarily, economically, they're sort of like buffering or bullying their other neighbors. Now, depending on how well the ISC and the Lyrans and the Carnivon all get along, maybe that's an alliance that goes the distance. And if that's the case, you've got an empowered, more robust Lyran military and economy. You've got a much stronger Carnivon economy and military. And potentially where the ISC are located, what the arrangements are there, they're going to be more robust militarily and economically. All 3 of those factions come south. That's the only direction they can go, unless they decide to eat each other or take out the Klingons, but I don't see that happening. So if they come south, what is that going to mean for the southern factions? What are they going to do? Again, those southern factions don't really have a lot of dog in the fight right now. There's no way that they can sort of influence really what's going on, but something to look at 20, 30, 40 turns ahead. what's going to happen in the dynamic between this behemoth of a power, granted a little hyperbole here, this behemoth, this unbelievable juggernaut, which is the Carnivon, and the sidekicks, the Lyrans and the IC. What's going to happen with those folks as they barrel down on the southern factions? Okay, off my soapbox. Let's jump in to the map. Let's talk about our good friends, the Lyrans. Oh, one thing. Before I go any further, I'm going to quickly slide back to the chat so we can go over what Eugene and Julian are saying. Okay, my apologies. So Eugene, I feel like my eyes are getting better because when I look at this, it's better to look at without glasses. Crazy. I hope last week's visitor has returned. Excuse me. Last week's visitor has returned and will enjoy this week's show. It is predicted to show the 3 Borak antagonists. Now, how they are losing the war and the futility of their aggressive actions. I'm assuming I must be reading that wrong. Let's try that again. I hope last week's visitor has returned and will enjoy this week's show. It is predicted to show the 3 Borak antagonists how they are losing the war and the futility of their aggressive actions. Okay. So the show is okay. Got it. Julian, hey, if it's okay for Star Trek the original series to use Eastern European actors to do Vulcan and Dorian accents, then I suppose the Kazinti could sound like the Germans. I mean, it could be worse. All right. Terrible. All right, let's slide back to our good friends, the Lyrans. Oh, yeah. All right, here we are. This is the Lyran faction, and let's slide over to the heat in the heat of the night. All right, so we're zoomed in as much as we can, and I'm going to take away the ships real quick so we can see what is going on here. So, big takeaways. Before this turn, we had a base under construction in this little crevice between these two red hexes here. In Hotel 23, the Lyrans were on the verge of completing a YBS. They also had their largest fleet, the vast majority of their military might concentrated in that hex, Hotel 23. That was in Home Fleet. And they were feeding more ships into that fleet or into that area prior to. We had, I think it was like 5 ships with a light cruiser, a couple destroyers, and so on in India 23. And then, of course, Home Fleet in Hotel 23. So, the Borak had come up with a convoluted plan to be able to punish the Lyrans. Maybe take advantage of the situation to leverage a specific kind of outcome. However, it required certain preconditions. So there was a lot of contingency orders written. Now, unfortunately for the Borak, the exact sequence of events that the Borak had hoped would occur did not occur. So the convoluted action plan was not executed, but rather the backup defensive plan was. Why? So the Lyrans decided to attack JJ22, this hex right here. Now, why were they attacking it? Because the YDK was going to complete at the beginning of the Borak turn. The Lyrans had initiative. They were going first, and then the Borak. The base was going to be fully operational on the Borak turn. So the Lyrans decided to attack preemptively, attack that base, destroy it before it completed. Totally makes sense. I would have done the same thing. In fact, I did. So they attack and they attempt to destroy that base. Now, what was interesting about that interaction was that the Lyrans brought a fleet of just a little over 20 ships. I think it was about 23 ships. As I look in my email, and I will try and find, excuse me, as for some reason that cold or whatever it was from a couple weeks ago, still kind of with me. Strange. Okay, so let's see here. I'm trying to find the initial. Okay, here we go. So Lyran forces that entered into the hex, and this is not a small fleet, right? So they attacked with a heavy dreadnought, which is their 6.8 dreadnought. It's a sort of an improved wire dreadnought. They originally, I think it was a 5.7 or something like that, and then the heavy dreadnought is a 6.8. So it's a good dreadnought, sort of very sort of par on the course for all dreadnoughts in the Y era. Heavy dreadnought, one of those, command ship. 4 heavy cruisers, which are 3.6s. 7 YCLs, that is 3.5s. So same attack factor, slightly less defense. 8 total destroyers and 6 frigates. The Borak was defending with 1 YBS, which was going to be completed to a YDK once the Borak turn started. A Romulan purchased Romulan Vulture, which is a great dreadnought. It's a 7.8 ship, 7 attack, 8 defense. The only one that's better is the ISC 7.9 dreadnought. 2 command cruisers, 8 cruisers, so total of 10 4.6 ships. They're all cruisers. 1 tug, which was completing the upgrade. 10 frigates and a prime team. So when you look at the disposition here, you've got 5, 12, 20, 26 ships on the Lyran side, and 12, 20, 23 ships on the Borak side. So a slight advantage for the Lyrans. They attacked, and long story short, once the battle was resolved, the losses were as follows. The Lyrans had 4 crippled YCLs, 5 destroyed frigates, and I captured one of their frigates. So of the 6 frigates they brought to the fight, they lost all of them, and 4 crippled YCLs. The Boraks had 1 crippled CA, 1 destroyed YFF, unfortunately, and 7 crippled YFFs. So generally speaking, not a terrible disposition in the sense of I killed or captured 6 ships and crippled 4. I only lost 1 ship and crippled 8. So not bad. But that was during the Lyran turn. And during the Lyran turn, they also did something else. As I bring back the ships here, they moved these guys that were sort of in this India 23 hex up to take these 2, or attempt to take these 2 resources. You can see here there's 1 solitary frigate and then a DD, CL, and 2 DDs. This was actually 2 YDDs initially. Or I think it was a YCL and a DD initially. So he was trying to capture those resources. I believe, and Chuck can correct me, I believe he misunderstood or made a mistake as to when that base that he was building was to complete. I think he thought that the base was completing this Lyran turn, and therefore he would have supply to be able to capture those resources. Because without the base completed, those ships, the YFF and the YDD, were now out of supply. Because the Lyrans, apparently, have 3 supply. So if we take away the ships real quick, this YDK has a reach of 3. 1, 2, 3. This base, had it been completed, would have had a reach of 3. 1, 2, 3. So that makes sense. But here's where it all falls down. This base only reaches to Hotel 23. And when he attacked me in JJ22, he retreated into India 23 and was out of supply, and therefore could not retro back to his YDK, meaning that these ships were stranded, which provided an opportunity. Now, I had already written orders in such a way that I was able to take advantage of this, but let me show you what happened. So now that this home fleet, which again, remember, has a bunch of crippled YCLs, destroyed all the frigates or captured them, and was sort of sitting vulnerable here in India 23. Then the Borak turn starts. And because I had the later initiative, and this is sort of one advantage of having the later initiative, all the ships that were crippled, with the exception of the cruiser, so all the frigates, those 7 frigates that were crippled, all got repaired. Those frigates, granted, they suck at a 1 attack, 3 defense, but they're a 1-point repair. Because the YDK completed on the beginning of my turn, the YDK can repair 8 points of damage, meaning I could repair all 7, and including the YFF that I captured, I repaired all those frigates. and then they were part of the attack that happened next. And this is where the sort of fumble happened. Okay, so I had not anticipated the Lyrans moving ships up into these hexes. That's my mistake. So they moved. I had a tug moving through this hex. When it moved in, 2 destroyers from the ships that were in India 23 reacted into that hex. But again, they were still out of supply. So you had 4 ships, in fact, all the ships that you see here in this hex. But one of the effects of being out of supply is you only have 50% of your attack factors. So you had 3 destroyers, which is instead of being 6 attack factors, is only 3, and a YCL, which is 1.5. So you had 4.5 attack factor, and I had a tug that moved into that hex with a 2 attack, 6 defense. And so basically, I effectively pinned, or he pinned me, but I effectively tied up 4 Lyran ships in this hex. Then the remainder of my fleet, you can see here red dragon and green and white dragon, moved across, pinning the ships that were in India 23, and then moving the rest to be able to attack the base. The way I'd written my orders was just such that I was prioritizing hitting the base as opposed to trying to do max damage to the fleet. So I pinned the ships, I moved past the ships into this hex, and I attacked the hex. Now here's the kicker. As the attacker, you get to decide in what sequence those battles occur. Because if I had attacked, for example, in the base battle, if I had attacked and then retreated into this hex, then I would cause those ships to do a fighting retreat out of that hex. So my objective was to do the maximum amount of damage and take out the maximum number of ships I could. So we did the base battle first, then we did India 23, and then resolved this little battle here. So what was the result of all that? The home fleet, which was in this hex, well, I'll do first one. So first one was the base battle. The tug that was building the base withdrew before battle, abandoning the base, which means I didn't even have to blow up the base or destroy the tug. He just gave up on the base completely. So the base was destroyed. I think there was 1 ship left in that hex, and it got destroyed without any damage to me whatsoever. So I think it was a frigate or something like that, and I popped it without even a second thought. Then this battle occurred, and because of the disposition, this is India 23. Where's India 23? So India 23 had, from my side, 3 command cruisers, 6 YCAs. So that's a total of 9 ships with the 4 attack, 6 defense. There was a crippled YCA because I didn't anticipate that the other ships would have been crippled. And then 9 frigates. These are all the ships that were pinning the ships that were there. The Lyrans, again, out of supply. And this is the kicker. They were out of supply, meaning their attack factors are halved. So they have a heavy dreadnought, which was from the previous attack, 4 CAs, 3 fully functional CLs, YCLs, 4 crippled, because remember I crippled 4 before, and then 7 DDs. So this fleet was in a hugely compromised state because they were out of supply. They were out of supply at the beginning of the turn. They were out of supply during the combat. So they really couldn't do as much damage as I could bring to the table. And I brought the max offensive firepower I could. As a result of that battle, the Borak had 1 YCA that was crippled and 1 YFF that was crippled. And I crippled an additional 2 CLs and 3 DDs. What does that mean? That just means that they have a lot of cripples. And then they had to retreat into the Hotel 23 hex. This battle had already been resolved and the fleet was untouched, still in that hex, ready to receive them. When you're doing a fighting retreat, the ships that are retreating, i.e. in this case the Lyrans, have a burr 0. And the ships that are in the hex, opposing that retreat, have burr 10. So that was a particularly advantageous situation for the Borak, which was, wrong hex, fighting retreat. Here we are. So the Borak forces had the Romulan dreadnought, a command cruiser, a CA, and 5 FFs. Not the biggest fleet by any means, but not entirely small. And then the ships retreating into that hex were the heavy dreadnought, 4 CAs, 1 fully functional CL, 6 crippled CLs, 4 DDs, and 3 crippled DDs. So again, lots of cripples. And then, so I was opposing the retreat and I tried to pursue. Now, unfortunately, the pursuit battle failed because, unfortunately, the GM rolled a 6, which is the only number you would roll, and the pursuit wouldn't work with that number of ships. So it's unfortunate. But I crippled another 3 DDs in that retreat battle, and I suffered 3 frigates crippled. So what does all that mean, and why am I wasting all this oxygen telling you all this? Well, the Lyrans currently have, this is Home Fleet. Home Fleet is the vast majority of their offensive firepower in this area. There's a tug here, which was the tug that was building the base that retreated, and then this fleet. Heavy dreadnought, 4 cruisers, 1 CL, 1 DD, and then 6 crippled DDs and 6 crippled CLs. This fleet is obviously beaten and battered. Now, the Lyrans have a lot of stuff still sort of coming up in the sense that on the YDK, they have a light cruiser and 3 frigates, part of their production pipeline that's moving forward. And they've also put together this Silver Moon fleet, which is on its way over as well, which I have to admit, I was sort of surprised seeing it come. Now, I'm trying to find Silver Moon. It was a little, there it is. Oh, Silver Moon fleet. Okay. So this fleet, which is Silver Moon right here, is 3 CLs and 5 FFs. So this is not an insignificant number of ships. We've got 3 frigates plus another 5. That's 8. We've got a CL here plus these 3. That's 4. So 4 CLs and 8 frigates on a YDK alone. Plus, I'm sure Home Fleet's going to move back here to start repairing. So all that combined makes this this YDK a bit of a hard target. Right? Or I'm not sure what they're going to do with the tugs and everything else. But nonetheless, we're on a bit of a standoff now. The desire to build that base, obviously the YBS they were building, obviously that's been halted. A very advantageous sequence of events for the Borak, and now we have a slight sort of setback for the Lyrans. No problem. The biggest sort of challenge for the Lyrans at this point is the fact that, of course, Home Fleet is battered. They need to move back to the YDK to be able to repair. But we have these ships now completely out of supply. There's no supply even remotely near. They have 5 ships, granted, just destroyers. Well, 1 light cruiser, 3 destroyers, and a frigate in problematic positions. That's going to make them sort of... It's going to be challenging to see how these ships get away without being destroyed, but it's certainly possible. And of course, the sort of the advance of the Lyrans has been halted. Putting this into big context, the Borak are going to get their asses handed to them one way or the other, but this was a bright star or a bright moment in what will inevitably be a cloud of shit for the Borak. So, wonderful sort of mistake as far as opportunistic mistake on the Lyran side, but an unfortunate mistake for the Lyrans, an opportunistic moment for the Borak that just happened to be sort of positioned in such a way to take advantage of it, and that is where we're at. But yeah, I mean, if this was a straight up fight between the Lyrans and the Borak, this could be and looks like it would be very entertaining as we go forward. Because, yeah, I mean, I think the Lyrans and the Borak, relatively speaking, here are quite sort of like evenly balanced. It's just a matter of sort of like the strategic play and what sort of each quote-unquote admiral general does to be able to sort of get an advantage one way or the other. So very interesting how this all sort of moves forward. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Anyways, that's how that is working going forward. Let's talk about the Carnivon, which are the This is the tsunami that is waiting to break. So the Carnivon have, I would say, they've been waiting on one thing, which was this YDK that completed here in KK12. This YDK is, of course, their supply point. And let's assume for a second that the Carnivon have supply 4. I think they have supply 3, but let's assume supply 4. If they have supply 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that gives them the reach down to Lima 15, which is the edge of Borak space at this point, after taking these two resources. That's the edge of Borak space and sort of as far as they can go. If they were to pop this base, which they can reach with a 4 movement of their fleet, they don't have any supply in this hex or anything beyond it. So getting here is going to be a challenge. If I'm the Carnivon and I want to lose as little as possible as I advance, I'm going to build another base right around here, probably in this hex here, and use that as a way to sort of creep forward. Now, if we look at the ships, what do we see? I got 2 tugs here. Well, looky there. 2 tugs. What does 2 tugs mean? Tugs mean one can start building and the other can provide extended supply. The extended supply does 2 things with the tug. One, the tug can be a strat move position. Now, granted, I think we're a little outside of the movement. So this is the capital. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, we're outside of the movement range for Y ships for strat move. But that's fine. They'll move here and then they'll move down. So we're going to have extended supply being offered here, and they're going to try and build something, most likely, like build a base or whatever it is, and away we go. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. And as they provide extended supply, the rest of their fleet is going to come down and pound through Borak positions. You might have noticed that there were a bunch of Borak ships floating around this space when the Carnivon declared war and moved in and took some resources. And as we were moving the ships back to a defensive position, the Carnivon, reacted to be able to pin those ships as best they could. And we had minor scuffles as the Borak moved back to retreat. And that's why you can see here there's a crippled YCC, because in one of those interactions, one of my CCs got crippled, and I think there's probably more than just one crippled YFF, but maybe it's just one crippled YFF. That would be unfortunate. All right, so as you can see here, we've got 1, 2, including the crippled CC, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ships and a tug on this hex, and nothing in the backfield because it's all being committed to the Lyrans, of course. So that's where we're at here. And what are we facing? Well, let's look. We've got Diamond Fleet. Ooh, Diamond. Hardest thing we know in the world. Oh. So Diamond Fleet, we'll put that here just so you can see it right there, is a CC, 3 CAs, CL, 3 DDs, a boatload of 7 frigates, and then 2 bombardment ships, 1 cruiser, 1 destroyer. That fleet alone is 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 plus 7, 15, 17 ships just in Diamond Fleet. Okay. And then on top of that, we have Wolfpack 1 and Home Fleet. Oh, yeah. Let's look at this. Wolfpack, we'll pull the Wolfpack over here. And then Carnivon Home Fleet. Oh, yeah. So, again, looking at the fleets, right? We got 17 ships here. Home Fleet is a DN. And why is that so important? Of course, because command ship. 5 attack, 8 defense. Not the greatest of dreadnoughts, but it has heel nippers. And heel nippers, they're like 1-point maulers, 1-point direct damage weapons. They are phenomenal. So, dreadnought, 4 cruisers, 1 light cruiser. 3 bombardment cruisers, better attack, slightly less defense. A destroyer and, what was that, 6? Come on, 6. No, 9. 9. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then 19 ships. So 17 plus 19 ships plus Wolfpack 2 and, oh yeah, Wolfpack 2. So Wolfpack 2 is another 2, 3, 4, so another 7 ships. Right, 26 ships plus 17 ships. Right. So that's 30, 43 ships in those fleets. 43 ships plus 2 tugs and a command cruiser and a frigate. So let's just say the frigate and the command. Let's just say the command cruiser. Plus this frigate. Plus these guys, 3 more cruisers and a frigate. And another frigate. So what was that? That's 4, 5, 6, 7. Another 7 ships plus, what did I say? It was 43. So another 7 ships. That's 50 ships. And then technically Wolfpack 6 is in reach. So what did we say? 60 ships? 60 ships plus Wolfpack 6, which is the bottom one here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So it's another 13. So that's 73 total ships. And maybe I'm missing 1 or 2. So let's call it 75. Just so like we're not using everything. 75 ships versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a base. Should I start getting depressed now or later? Yeah, so that's the reality of what the Borak, as I, the player, am looking at and facing. It is that overwhelming force. There's nothing I can do. Like, even in my best moments with my best fleet, like my best fleets are currently engaged with the Lyrans. So my best fleets had, let's say I have 20 some odd ships. Let's say 25 ships. I'm just being totally optimistic. 25 ships versus 75 ships. Even if all my ships are cruisers, so I get the best attack factors, it's still a 3-to-1 ratio just with the Carnivon. Just with the Carnivon. One more time. Just with the Carnivon. Like 3-to-1 just with the Carnivon. I could fight the Lyrans. It would be a fair fight. I couldn't realistically fight the Carnivons. It would be it's a brutal fight. The fact that I'm fighting the Carnivons and the Lyrans and the ISC, unbelievable. But speaking of the ISC, let's go take a look at them too. All right. So we got this fleet of ships that's coming in. So we got these 2 guys that came in and popped a couple of exploration ships, freighters. So no big loss, but just irritating. So a command cruiser and a destroyer, no big deal. We've got Justice and Enforcement fleet, which when we look at the named echelons, there's not much there, right? We've got Justice and Enforcement. So that's Justice, which is 1 ship, and Enforcement, which is 2 ships. So basically a command cruiser and a cruiser, so 2 cruisers and a DD. That's all that's here. So that's a total of 5 ships in this little pocket. And then here we have, I'll move this out of the way so it's a little easier. This is home fleet plus this. Now, it's deceiving because home fleet, you would think, oh my God, there's a massive fleet there. It's not as big as you think. It's 3 ships. So the Dreadnought, again, the ISC Dreadnought is the best Dreadnought in the game at this point. It is a 7-9 ship, 7 attack, 9 defense. Great ship. The CL and the FF, arguably, I think the CL is one of the best ships, especially for the ISC, based on its attack and defense factor and its cost. Like it's just the best bang for your buck. So these ships are good, but that's 3 ships plus the ships that you see in the stack here. So frigate, destroyer, light cruiser, cruiser, destroyer, frigate. So we got 3 frigates, 2 destroyers, 2 light cruisers, and a cruiser, and of course a tug. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, not including the tug. Plus the 3 ships there, that's 11. Plus the 5 other ships is a total of 16 ships. So 16 ships coming from the ISC side. There's more coming down, but as of right now, that's where those ships are sort of in the ballpark. So I would argue that the Borak could conceivably have a fighting chance if they were fighting a defensive game, if they were fighting the ISC and the Lyrans. Theoretically, there is a chance of being successful in a defensive game. But again, I go back to 75 plus ships from the Carnivon. I only have 57 in my entire fleet. And there's 75 plus coming down just from the Carnivon. As I mentioned, or as I showed with the Lyrans, we've got a fleet composition of something like 20 to 30 ships. Obviously, a bunch crippled because of a very sort of, good sequence of events from the Borak perspective. So we've got basically 30 ships on the Lyran front. We'll be generous and call it 20 ships on the ISC front, and 75 ships coming down from the Carnivon. 30, 20, 75. That is a total of 125 ships that I have to defend against, and I only have a fleet of 57. I can build more, obviously, but there's not enough that I can build in the time frame that I have to be able to defend against all those folks. So, what does all that mean? There is no way. I mean, like I say, I could have a fair fight with the Lyrans. I could theoretically defend against the ISC and the Lyrans concurrently because, granted, it's logistically challenging because they're on two polar opposite sides of my borders. But regardless of, even if I didn't have to fight the Lyrans and I didn't have to fight the ISC and I was only fighting the Carnivon alone are too much for me to handle. Like just a straight up one-on-one fight, I can't deal with them. That is why, for example, earlier I had made or reached out to the ISC to create this defense pact because it was very clear early on that the Carnivon were going to be the big bully in the corner, or big bully in this corner of the galaxy, and the smaller folks, i.e. me, the IC, and even the Lyran, needed to band together in some way to like be a buffer against them, because the Carnivon could conceivably take the ISC and the Borak on together. Like that would be a reasonably fair fight because of like the size of our economies and how much we can all build and the amount of ships that they have. Like that could be more of a fair fight. But obviously all three of them ganged up against me. I have no chance. It's just a matter of time and how long I can make that last. That's the only thing. So yeah, that's the situation I'm in. I've got an unbelievably large Carnivon behemoth bearing down on me. I have a heel nipping. I know it's a Carnivon thing, but I've got a heel nipping sidekick, or opportunistic individual, which is the ISC coming in the back door. Because I mean, who doesn't love a Hershey highway? And then of course I've got the full on front facing fight with the Lyrans. So at this point, there's no real, I mean, we'll see how it goes, but you tell me, do you think there's a chance that the Borak could somehow survive this? You let me know. All right. So let's jump into the chat because I can see some questions already happening. And again, like, it's a war game. I just want to re-emphasize what I said at the very beginning. This is a war game. It's about fighting a war. Someone's got to lose, and someone's got to lose first. And it totally makes sense. Like in a war game with everything that we've got, and it's a zero-sum game, this is what's going on, and it is what it is. This is what any of us as players got into in the sense of fighting a war game. It is unfortunate when you feel that there is no way to win, or at least that's what it feels like at this point. But it's just a game, and this is the way it's played. So my feelings are not hurt, although I may be a little grumpy. My feelings are not hurt about the fact that this is going down. And I'm more than happy to be I'm more than happy to be the one getting their teeth kicked in. All right, let's go to the chat here. So Chuck says, Chuck says, nope, just denying them to the Borak. So I think what he's referring to there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck, those are the ships that you moved in to take those resources. So denying them from the Borak and effectively just sort of compromising my economy. So that's great, because one of the challenges as we move forward, the Borak economically, right? Like whenever you're in a war, it can often swing one way or the other, which is that your economy continues to grow as you are successful in a war, or it starts to collapse as you are unsuccessful. And one of the challenges around being on the losing side of that is that as your economy begins to collapse ever faster, it starts to become depending on how you're managing your finances, it can become really problematic, because if you overspend in one turn and you start the next turn in a negative total EP, then you can't build anything. And this was something that played out in our New Worlds campaign. The Klingon player, me, had, because again, 3 players on 1, we had the Romulans. So at the time, it was the Romulans attacking me with this long drawn out war on our border. And then the Gorn and the Tholians came through a wormhole to attack me. The Romulans had executed some kind of maneuver where they had basically taken more than I had anticipated as far as EP away from me. And by doing that, they were able to get my economy in the negative. It was like negative by like a decimal point, like decimal 3 or decimal 4 EP. Not a full EP, but just negative. And because it was just negative, I had planned a whole bunch of builds to go defend this wormhole, which arguably, if they had been able to be built and move, there was a chance that I could have defended the wormhole because of the mechanics about wormhole transit. Unfortunately, I was negative, couldn't build those ships, couldn't stop them. The Gorn and the Tholians came through, and I think the Tholians had like 40 or 50 ships or something stupid. So they came through, and that was the end. That was the end. So, yeah. So as you are on the losing side of a war and your economy gets worse and worse and worse, you can get yourself into a position where this kind of thing happens. And so a losing player can go from bad to worse in a relatively short period of time. So it's something to be very mindful of. Chuck says, big question. Does the Borak continue to mass versus the Lyrans and let the others two have free reign? Great question. So, and Chuck's asking that. So in a situation where you're being attacked on multiple fronts, where do you apply your resources? Or do you pull stuff from one front to another? I guess it depends on your goals, right? And I'm not going to divulge the Borak goals here because, I mean, I'm losing anyway. So I guess there's we'll say 3 different ways to go. One is to turtle, which is you just pull everything back to your most defendable positions that are most centrally located, and you just try and turtle up and defend that sort of shell. And that might work, I would argue, in a situation where the fights are more proportional, right? Like you had let's say you have a fleet of 20 versus another fleet of 20. It makes sense to go to a defendable position and fight that fight. Arguably, that's what happened in JJ22. One of the big factors that made that fight successful for the Borak was a combination of things. One, EW, meaning that the base that was there had EW, and there was no EW being brought by the Lyrans. So EW on the defender side, no EW on the attacker side, gave an advantage to the defender. And just the way the contingency orders were written, the point at which the Lyrans retreated, it just became very advantageous for the Borak, how that all sort of panned out. But in this situation, which, as I mentioned, is like 4-to-1 ratio. Well, if you look at the total number of ships, I mean, we've got, what was it? 47 for the Lyrans. I think 47 for the, hold on. Let's look at fleet cap again. So looking at total number of ships, I know it's not quite the same because of where all the ships are located, but Borak have 57 ships. So let's call it an even 60 just for S&Gs. The Carnivon have 120, so it's 2-to-1 ratio just to start. The ISC have 47. We'll call it 50 for ease. So that's 170 to 60. And then the the Lyrans, where are you? Lyrans have 61, so we'll call it 60. So we have 240 ships versus 60. That is literally 4-to-1 ratio. So in a 4-to-1 ratio, there's no, and with all the ships being relatively equal, like, I mean, there's slight differences here and there, but I mean, there's no, this isn't a scenario where you have, let's say, the Borak with M-Tech, and they have like ships that are 7 attack, 7 defense, or something like that. Like, there's not a disproportional pound for pound advantage on the defender side. It's all relatively equal. So the only sort of determining factor is things like EW and little things like that. So at a 4-to-1 ratio of being outgunned, there is no hope. Like, there's no way to win that fight realistically. It's only a matter of how much can you make the other person bleed in that example. So that's one. So like one, if you were to turtle up and try and protect yourself in that way, how long can you last? And again, with a 4-to-1 ratio, I don't think you really can, arguably. The second option would be, shall we say, a tactic that was used by a previous player in a previous game, where you make it as painful as possible, meaning you bleed and keep the other players at war for as long as possible. So it becomes a Pyrrhic victory, meaning that they will, in this context, they may win the war versus the Borak, but they may not win the game, because you will force them to incur so many war turns over time that other players will then be able to take advantage of their compromised state. So let's say, for example, let's say this I was able to make this last as long as 15 turns. So I make it last as long as 15 turns. All the other players are sort of preparing in this time. And so they have 50, everyone here has 15 approximately war turns banked. And just because they're close, let's say the Klingons decide to say, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll make a move. Now, maybe they choose not to go against the Carnivon because whatever, they got good relations. There's proportional strength there, whatever. But the Lyrans are within reach, and the Lyrans are, shall we say, compromised because they're not as strong as the Klingons, even with their military war economy. But they have 15 war turns. So the Klingons, which are fresh, decide, you know what? I'm going to do a 10-turn war and see what I can do. So 10 turns of war, because they don't want to get overly committed either. So they do 10 turns of war, because it'll take 10 turns for the Carnivons, by example, to get down to 10 war turns. So they do 10 turns of war, pushing the Lyrans into economic exhaustion, or the first tier of economic exhaustion. Their economy is already going to be smaller than the Klingons, even with whatever they win from the Borak. And most likely they'll be out of position when this attack happens. So the Klingons are able to grab a whole bunch of territory, potentially, economically compromise the Lyrans, and based on the position of the Lyran capital relative to where the Klingons are, they perhaps position themselves into a spitting distance of the Lyran homeworld. And because of the relative military strength, there's, they've got the strength to do it. Whether they go the full way and take out the Lyrans completely, who knows what the military position is at that point. But that's an example of where the Klingons might take advantage of that. Maybe in a different scenario, the Kzinti come up, or the Federation come up and attack the Lyrans. Because again, the Lyrans are one of those factions that are right on the border there. So this is just an example because of where the Lyrans are positioned. But you would, as the Borak, I would force those three factions to put themselves in a compromised position so that other players later can take advantage of it, setting them up for potential failure or potential loss because I'm dying anyway, kind of thing. So that's the second option. The third option here is some kind of diplomatic solution, and I say that because we'll throw this into the chat because I see Eugene's throwing this out there too. So let's read this. So Eugene says, "Have the Borak weighed the price of peace? have the Borak offered terms to allow the Lyrans, ISC, and Carnies to go to peace and escape the trap of the Borak have set to destroy them. So this is from a player perspective. This is a point of extreme frustration for me as a player, not the faction, but the player. Because, and again, in games like this, it's always challenging, right? Because you've got people dynamics and then sort of the role-playing dynamics of how you're playing things out. So from the very beginning, the Borak have been very proactive with the diplomatic side. So, for example, we got the Mutual Defense Pact with the ISC. We're trying to, quote-unquote, aggressively, like, try to work out some kind of agreement with the Carnies. We had an agreement, so to speak, in the first come, first serve policy. You might have seen the short about that, which was just basically that the Carnivon didn't want to have a firm border. Therefore, they wanted to just like, you explore, I'll explore, we'll just kind of explore together, and you keep the resources you find, I keep the resources I find, and so on and so forth. So that was sort of the agreement we had in place. Very similar to what they had with the Klingons, in the sense the Klingons don't have a neutral zone, a hard neutral zone either. So that same dynamic was playing out there. So, okay, we had an agreement with the Carnies, we had an agreement with the IC, and then we're trying to get an agreement with the Lyrans. In fact, for those of you on our Discord channel, and feel free to head over to our coffee/New Worlds, link in the corner, pinned in the comment chat below, or pinned in the chat, there we are. So if you head over there and you get our coffee and Discord tier, you could see on our Discord channel, we have a sort of roleplay narrative for what goes on in the game. And in that narrative, there was a consistent attempt to negotiate something. We have different channels of communication in this game, like chats on Discord, messages on Discord, email, and so on and so forth. Regardless of which channel it was, there were countless attempts to try and negotiate something with the Lyrans. And whether it's role-playing, player personality, whatever it is, it was a combination of no response and or just obviously there was no offer that was tempting enough to take, I suppose. And the challenge was every time, or I guess what was perceived as reasonable on the Borak side was perceived as unreasonable on the Lyran side, and vice versa. When the Lyrans would make the few times that the Lyrans did make a proposal, it was perceived on the Borak side as totally unreasonable, unrealistic, and so on and so forth. And then the Lyrans felt obviously the same way about the Borak propositions, clearly. So there was no common ground, there was no ability to work, and seemingly, at least from this side of the negotiating table, it seemed like the Lyrans wanted to fight. They wanted to fight, and so they were looking for an excuse to do it. And so they did. And so that's sort of how that devolved. And at this point, even now, from a role-playing perspective, the Borak have indicated they're open to negotiations. But, I mean, if I'm the Lyrans, the Carnies, or the ISC, why would I negotiate? I mean, if you are concerned about war turns, yes, it makes sense to negotiate. If you're not concerned about war turns, what would be the motivation, right? Like, why would you be interested in negotiating? Do you think you could use the Borak in some way, shape, or form later as either a balancing faction versus somebody else, or can they be of some advantage to you in some way? If you see a path for that, then sure. But the challenge I think right now is that with the three factions ganging up on the Borak, there's no downside to taking them out. The only question will be who gets the spoils or who gets the biggest reward. And so I'll come back to that in a second. So Eugene says, missed message above. Tried to post to pro-Borak posts, but I seem to be in violation of the community guidelines. Even YouTube is conspiring against the Borak. Okay. Bill says, I had 30 ships. Tholians had like 50 plus Gorns. Kicked door open so Tholians could finish it. Yeah, so Bill's making reference to the previous game. Eugene, only 4-to-1 ratio. Plenty of glory for Borak captains to gain, but not odds that gives rise to legendary status. I guess. So here's sort of how this may work going forward. So if the Borak are going to lose, the question is, how do they lose? How do the Borak choose to go down this sewer drain or rabbit hole? So the Borak have a clear number of ships, not insignificant number of ships, but the positioning of those ships is problematic. The ISC are in a position where the Borak can't really move stuff. The Borak have to make a choice, move it west or move it east. And obviously there's a lot coming west and less coming east. 3-1 on the west side, 1-1 on the right side. And also there's time and distance. So the ISC have a lot of distance to cover before they are before they're threatening the economic position of the Borak. Yeah, there's like lots of dead space there, but there's it's going to take some time for them to get into a position to do anything really meaty. Okay, so if that's the case, we've got some time. The Carnivon are in a position where within probably around 3 to 4 turns, they're going to, if they don't do it already, they can just flood through that hole once that base is destroyed. They can just flood through the hole, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. The Lyran side, the Lyrans are very clearly, at this point anyway, on their back foot. They're not down by any means. They've still got lots of punch left, and they can cause me a lot of pain and suffering. But they are definitely, their nose has been bloodied, and they need to take a step back. So what is the path forward for the Borak? Well, if there's time, then the Borak can just buy time with the ISC, because it's going to take them too long to sort of get in a position to do anything really bad. The Carnivon are going to come down hard and fast. The question is how hard and how fast. They can come down the hardest, again, 3-1, just on their side alone. But what can I do to potentially stem the tide of their advance? Probably very, very little. Like, I can do very little to stop them. So the best return on investment, arguably, is on the Lyran side. What is the advantage of picking a fight with the Lyrans? Well, essentially, I can fight a war of denial. While the Carnivons continue to advance and sort of take territory from me, and arguably the ISC at the same time, I can fight a war that denies the Lyrans any of it. I could be arguably spiteful in the sense of how I'm going to go down. I could cause them so much pain and suffering that and be such a roadblock to their potential advancement and gaining any of the resources that could be a reward for this war, and basically create a situation where the Carnivon just reap almost all of the reward. Imagine this. Imagine if because of the problems or the challenges around logistics for the Lyrans at this point, what if the Carnivons come down hard and fast? They take that entire pocket of resources between that's sort of like that little pocket of Borak space where the Borak are touching the Carnivon in the north and the Lyrans in the west. If the Carnivons basically come down and take that all, then where can the Lyrans go? Nowhere. The Lyrans can't advance through that space if the Carnivons have it. They could throw ships through to be able to help the overall war effort, but they won't gain any resources for it. And when the war is over and the Borak have fallen, the Carnivon will be this behemoth of a military force. They will be so disproportionately, so much larger than everybody else, the ISC or the Lyrans, that the Carnivon will be faced with a challenge. They will be economically far beyond everybody else. They will be positionally denying resources to the other fighters in this war. And then what do they do? Well, I mean, they could choose to turn on the ISC and or the Lyrans. If they chose to turn on the Lyrans, they could either do it through vicariously through the Klingons or some other faction, or they could do it themselves. The Lyrans will be abused and beaten down, and won't necessarily have even at the current state of their military, they don't have the strength to oppose the Carnivon. Nobody does. Or if the Carnivon are so interested, maybe they, with all the economy they have and the stuff that they can build, and the ISC over like totally positioning all their stuff to be able to fight and take Borak space, what if the Carnivon just go straight for the Lyran or the ISC homeworld? The Carnivon could take of the ISC quickly, relatively quickly and easily, and then have that whole corner. They would have Borak space, ISC space, and they would just dominate. There would be no one who could oppose them, and it would just be a matter of time. So if the Borak are going to have any way to be able to shape the conditions of victory for this party of three, then it makes sense for me as the Borak to deny as much as possible to the Lyrans, make them hurt as much as I can, and essentially create opportunity for the Carnivon to dominate. Why would I want that? Because as a player, I'm going to be out of this game soon. And the sooner there can be a victor in this game, the sooner the next game starts and I can get a fresh start. So I want to create the conditions for Carnivon victory as quickly as possible. That would be my motivation, arguably. So let's take a quick look at the chat and see where we're at. Del. No one expects the Tholian Inquisition. Bill Smith. Hey, Del. Not the Tholian Inquisition. No! Yes, bring the comfy chair. Hi, Bill. Sorry, sir. The Borak have denied you the comfy chair. We have emergency futons. Very good, sir. All right. So, yes. So what do you think? What do you think of my sort of thought process here? The Borak are going to fall. It's a matter of time. The question is, how do we die? Do we die on our sword in a noble and purposeful way to be able to provide a direction for the victor? Or do we just make it as painful as possible for everybody for as long as we can as people go down? There is another option here. There is another option for sort of how things go forward. I don't know, because diplomacy has been a strong influence in this game. Diplomacy has influenced not only the back channel conversations, as in stuff that doesn't happen on the map necessarily, but the Borak were, shall we say, aggressively, in the sense of like proactively reaching out to the Carnivon, the ISC, the Federation, the Kzinti, everybody, the Klingons, proactively reaching out to all these different factions in a fashion to be able to apply diplomatic pressure to the Lyrans to just agree to some kind of peace term, like just some kind of border. And as it was shared with me, the Lyrans took quite offense to that. And as a result, engaged in their own diplomacy. And instead of applying diplomatic pressure, applying military pressure. So the Lyrans negotiated their way into some kind of alliance with the Carnivon. Again,
Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria.
Crazy. The Carnivon and the Lyrans working together was not something I anticipated because it seemed counterintuitive, although fair. And then the ISC backstab, I'm not sure what kind of negotiations happened to be able to affect that turnaround, but no, we took offense at your stance. Once again, false news. Okay, so Chuck, what do you mean by took offense at your stance? Are you talking about the border proposals or something else in that context? And we can certainly talk about that in the Discord channel when the time comes. But from the Borak player's perspective, again, the the current way to play the game is either play a game of denial and sort of pick the faction I want to hurt the most, because I can't hurt them all equally because they're going to wipe me out collectively. So who do I deny the most to? And the person I can deny the most to at this point is the Lyrans, just based on where all the ships are and what I can do and the current results. Like, it is what it is. So if that's the way it is, that's sort of the best path forward for me at this point, because I've got time for the IC. I can't stop the Carnivon. And I'm sort of on target, so to speak, with the Lyrans. Of course, there is always the opportunity, as Eugene kind of mentioned, there's always the opportunity to be able to have some kind of negotiated deal. And so Chuck says, your proposals, duh. So, so the Borak have made multiple proposals for peace. And the question is, what kind of proposals would be reasonable to be able to get to some kind of peace or stop hostilities to some degree? As mentioned in the chat, the Borak remain open, and of course, self-interested to do so, to continue negotiations and have some kind of non-violent resolution to this. But what does it look like? How's this going to go forward? We shall see. So, if you want to follow the flaming, the crashing plane that is the Borak intergalactic flight here, or the car crash that is the collision between all these factions and the Borak, then please feel free to be like Tom, to hit the subscribe button and follow along. If you love what is going on here in some way, shape, or form, then please feel free to head over to coffee.com/newworlds and join us over on our Discord channel with the Coffee and Discord tier, or you can send the one-time coffee donation. We're only one of 4. Our goal today was 4 coffees. We're only one of 4. Brutal. I'm going to take a sip regardless because my whistle needs wetting. Stand by. Oh, yeah. Okay. Coffee is going downrange, and it seems that the phaser fire and photons are coming downrange at the Borak. I've got to prepare. I got to prepare for defending my position. We shall see. Yeah, good question. Paul's asking what happened to the Lyran dragon. I don't think they killed it because there's no ships that are crippled or anything like that. It seems like it just disappeared. I don't know. We'll see. Anywho, let's say that if you are so interested, follow us next week and see what the latest and greatest developments are when it comes to Lyran, Carnivon, ISC, and Borak survival, as well as everybody else in the galaxy. How have the Paravian continued to expand their fleet? How have the Hydrans slowly creeped towards the edge of the galaxy? Have the Federation decided to interject or dip their fingers in the intergalactic romance of what is going on? Has the Khazinti continued to be... No, that's a terrible accent. Have the Khazinti continued to be the Germans that they are, thriving and expanding the economy in such a wonderful way? Or have the Klingons continued their push of exploration and expansion, applying pressure to their other neighbors? Only time will tell, and you can join us next Saturday to find out more. With that said, thank you very much. There is always enough fuel to get to the scene of the crash. Borak are ready to get there, it seems. Apparently. Riding that comet all the way down. Okay, with that said, if you are interested in all things war, then please feel free to join us next Saturday. Hit the subscribe button, get those alerts, and carry us along as we end out this.
Good God, y'all.
Curious if you're hearing static or if you're hearing static on mine. Anyways, I will see you all next week. Ciao